bring in Tom Verducci, the great baseball writer from Sports Illustrated. He joins us now. How about that? Would you rather have Maddox's career or Joe Torre's?
That is a great question because watching the ceremonies and listening to Joe Torre, he's connected to so many different Hall of Famers and famous people. And he played with Hank Aaron and managed Boggs, who was up there, Lou Brock, Bob Gibson, the Yankees championship. He's a borderline Hall of Fame player and obviously a definite Hall of Famer as a manager. And now an executive with Major League Baseball. I might take that career, but I got to tell you, for the 5 or 6 years, I think Greg Maddux executed the craft of pitching better than anybody ever. That's how highly I think of Greg Maddux. So that would have been fun for that brief period. Not real brief, but for that window of time, I'd rather be Greg Maddux.
Can Maddux be underrated?
Yes, I really think that's true. You know what's funny? I was wondering yesterday why he went first. 6 guys were making their speeches. It wasn't alphabetical, of course. And that was typical Maddux. He figured out the system and said, I want to go first to get it out of the way, and then I can enjoy the 5 other guys. And Bobby Cox told a great story that before a game when Maddux was pitching, he would give Cox basically a script. Here are the things that are going to happen today, and I want you to be aware of these situations, matchups that he wanted, bases open, who to pitch to, who not to pitch to. And more often than not, those things would actually happen. I've never been around a guy who understood baseball on a completely different level than anybody else. He was savant when it came to breaking down hitters, understanding the game of baseball, not just pitching. So, yeah, I think he's the winningest pitcher alive. He's the winningest right-handed pitcher in the live ball era. And yet, he doesn't come to the top of the mind because he wasn't a huge strikeout guy.
Hall of Fame voting changes now, the window of opportunity down to 10 years. Why?
I think that's enough. If you're not a Hall of Famer after 10 years, you should be in after 10 years, right?
Yep.
I think what's happened, Dan, is that the ballot has gotten so crowded, a lot of people are saying, well, I want to vote for more than 10 people, but with all the holdover candidates, I can't. And, listen, Don Mattingly was a great, great player. I covered him at the top of his career. He's not getting in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Dale Murphy was on the ballot 15 times. He just never had the momentum, not even close as a sport of getting in. So if you knock some of these people off the ballot, there's a fewer names, and there's a better chance others will get in.
Any way that the steroid guys get in? With an asterisk, Tony La Russa talked about this. It's a museum. That's what people have to understand. This is a museum telling the history of the game. Can you put them in without shedding a negative light on the Hall of Fame?
So in other words, we change the rules for those guys.
Well, I don't know.
That's what we want to do.
Well,
no, I think the answer is no, because people confuse telling the history of the game, which I'm totally in agreement with you, to that gallery of the plaques and that inner circle of, hey, you are a Hall of Famer. It's not like, Soviet Russia where we scrub these guys' names off of history and you can't mention the word Barry Bonds once you get inside the museum. There are displays and have been displays that recognize, well, even Pete Rose, who's obviously not in the Hall of Fame. So it's not that they're not in the Hall of Fame. They're not Hall of Famers. Big difference there, and I have no problem with that difference.
Okay, what about the steroid area? That you have just these guys recognized with their accomplishments, but you understand who they were as far as you're still telling the history of the game, and it's some of it's positive, some of it's negative, but you're still Bonds and McGuire, Sosa, Clemens are still part of the history of the game.
Yeah, maybe we can build a Kirk Radomski wing to the museum. How about listen, I think they have had some displays about that era. I don't think they specifically call it the steroid era. But, yeah, I would have no problem with that. But, again, to enshrine these guys for what they did in the game, to give them the greatest honor that you can give an individual in the game, I don't think that justifies their behavior didn't justify that kind of honor. To have them mentioned, displays, artifacts, absolutely, part of the history of the game.
But why did La Russa say put him in with an asterisk?
Probably because a lot of his career was helped by guys who were using chemicals.
Should he have gotten into the Hall of Fame? Shouldn't he have been under the scrutiny of managing guys who were using?
Scrutiny, sure, but he should be enshrined. First of all, it's two different bodies. People are saying, oh, the writers are hypocritical. You keep McGuire out, you put LaRussa in. Well, no. The writers voted on McGuire. The writers didn't vote on LaRussa. That's a separate committee.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's a couple of media people, but it's basically former players and executives. So let's get that straight. And the other thing is McGuire is the one who made the decision to use steroids. LaRussa did not. His involvement was more a passive one than an active one. That's another huge difference.
What role does a manager play in that? Knowing that you have guys, he said he had 100. His teams were 100% clean, but he still had suspicions there. Is there a role that a manager plays here in playing locker room police?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how far that role goes. I mean, it's kind of like the teacher, in some cases the parent, where you're really the last ones to really know what's going on with your kid. The kid's not going to fess up and say, hey, I'm getting involved in things I shouldn't be involved in. And unless you want to follow these guys around in their off hours, and nobody expects that of a manager, again, you may have suspicions, but to literally know what someone is doing and what they're taking, that's a lot to ask of a manager. And obviously their radar is up. Maybe they hear some things around the clubhouse. But I think sometimes, especially for general managers, they would more be the last to know than the first to know. Now, should he have acted on suspicions? I guess so, but, I've known cases where guys have asked players, if there's anything going on, let me know. Or, is there something I should know about? A player's just not going to come out and tell a guy, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm using steroids.
He's Tom Verducci of Sports Illustrated. First place team that doesn't make the playoffs.
That's a really good question. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit and say Milwaukee. Not that I'm sold on Milwaukee, because I think they're a legit contender here. But I like the way Pittsburgh is playing right now, and I think the Cardinals are still a threat. So that's going to be a great race where obviously, you may see one or both or two teams in that division not making it if the Giants still hang on for a wild card in the NL West. You
got so many teams that are in the thick of things with the playoff race. With the trade deadline coming up, do we see little action because of that? Or is there a big name you might see dealt?
I think you'll see action, Dan, but I don't see big names going. I guess the one wrinkle lately has been the John Lester situation. Now, the Red Sox are going to put him on the market. They will take offers on Lester, but the price is really, really high. And give John Lester credit, by the way, because he has said, hey, if they deal me, I'm not going to take it personally, and I could re-sign after the season as a free agent with Boston. So it's a very mature approach on his part. I applaud him for that. And so the Red Sox will put him out there, but there's no discount here on John Lester. With Price pretty much off the market the way Tampa Bay is playing, he's a difference maker. John Lester can be what Sabathia was, what was that, back in 2008, or Cliff Lee in 2010. Guy a lot of teams would like to get in on, but the price is going to be really high. So I'm not expecting a John Lester deal to be done, but I think you'll hear that name a lot this week.
Thank you, Tom.
You got it, Dan. Thank you.
That's Tom Verducci, Sports Illustrated.